Hey guys, this is the last hit I get at the verse where it tells us to see things through the eyes of our hearts. Open the eyes of your hearts, people, because you'll see something completely different. But the interesting thing as I conclude this little series on this little verse is that people who live like this in the journey that we call life are distinctly set apart from the rest. They just seem to be different to everybody else. And indeed they are. They've had nothing to hide, they've got nothing to lose, and they have nothing to prove. Therefore, so they can get on and live life to the full, because they've got none of that other stuff to carry on with. But when we talk about having nothing to lose and everything to gain, that one thought can transform your entire life. In Genesis chapter 5, we meet a unique individual who surely is an Old Testament version of this New Testament verse. We find his story in Genesis chapter 5, or is mentioned in Genesis 5. Genesis 5 is a long list of genealogy. There was this man, and he begat so many children, and then he died. And it's a whole list of all those people in the Old Testament. And you read this one after the other, then all of a sudden you get to this guy called Enoch. And Enoch obviously was different to the rest. His life stood apart from the rest of people. And it says the same things in the beginning. Enoch lived this many years, he had this many children. And then it says this, and Enoch walked with God and was no more. He bypassed death. So different was his life in God's eyes that God said, listen, man, you and I are so close anyway. You and I are walking through this journey of life. You're seeing me through the eyes of your heart. Man, I'm just going to help you to bypass death, and you can walk straight into eternity. And he took him to heaven, and he never died here physically on this earth. And it mentions this one man, Enoch, walked with God, and then shoo, he was no more. Most of us, pretty much all of us, walk with God and then we die. And that's okay if we go to the right place and we'll see the proof or the fruit of our investment. But to be that close, that close that God says, I walk with you every day. I can't wait to be with you, to walk through life with you, to teach you what life is about, to be able to take the things that you're going through and begin to journey this life with you. And for you to be able to look to God and say, Lord, I just love walking with you. You make sense of this life. Every challenge I have, every problem I have, when I see through the eyes of my heart, they all make sense. But if I'm looking at them through physical eyes, none of that stuff will ever make sense. But when I walk with you, it's like crazy, because I see life the way you see it. I see death the way that you see it. I see my past the way you see it, and I see my future surely the way that you have told me that it will be. We walk with God. We therefore stand apart from the crowd. And I would love, wouldn't you love to have that being said of you? Maybe we don't do it for this reason, but I've done a few funerals recently of great people, who maybe weren't quite Enoch's, but man, they stood apart. They stood high above the rest of the folk. And that when they left this place, man, they surely left a legacy of somebody who knew a closeness with God that is unusual, that spoke into people's lives, that spoke of a life so close to God. Man, I want a life like that. Don't you? But open the eyes of your heart. Begin to see life the way that God sees it, and see what happens at the end of the day. This has been a great verse for us to speak about. I hope that it's meant as much to you as it has to me. Now, let's go and enjoy the weekend. Bye-bye, everybody.